Hello and welcome to Dbg Connect, a platform created by the Development Bank Ghana to enable key conversations we need to drive growth in various sectors of the Ghanaian economy. My name is Kojo Akoto-Boateng. I'm your moderator, and today we are talking about agribusiness and specifically financing agribusiness, the opportunities, the challenges, and the solutions. I have three seasoned practitioners in the space. These are the best people you can have to have this conversation in Ghana at the moment. My first guest is the CEO of Dbg, Mr. Keduka. Welcome to this conversation.
Thank you, Kojo.
My second guest is the CEO of Fidelity Bank, Mr. Julian Opuni. Julian, welcome to the conversation. And my third guest is the CEO for GIRSAL. GIRSAL is just an abbreviation. The actual name of GIRSAL can solve all our problems. Mr. Kwesi, Korboe. Welcome to the conversation.
Good afternoon.
Ghana incentive
Risk-based sharing
for agricultural lending. And that is Mr. Kwesi Korboe. These gentlemen combined, if I'm not exaggerating, they have about 100 years experience in the finance space. KK I've known for years, Julian as well, and Keduka as well. And we are going to talk about the space. So just pick your notepads, get a pen, and take notes because this is a very, very important conversation. Let me start off with you, KK. How's business doing? You've done this for years since I've known you. You are actively farming as well. Let's talk about your farm. You're growing coconuts up the mountain?
Yes.
How many acres are you doing at the moment?
About 120 acres now and growing.
120 acres and growing. And how is it going for you so far?
Well, it involves quite some money. It involves planning, disease control, but it's a good business. You just have to be consistent and ensure that you keep things in check, And once you've done that, you can harvest for over 20 years. So you are sowing a seed for my pension plan.
Then you made me put my pension plan in place way too early.
You are too young, so you have enough time.
But you asked me to do coconuts as well.
I know that.
This year has been good. It's been raining, so we've not really had to worry about irrigation and all that.
Yeah, the thing about rain is that plants need rain, but it depends on the volume and the frequency. Mm-hmm. Too much volume can be destructive. Yeah. And if it's too frequent, you can't do much work around whether you're doing fertilizer application or chemical application. So, farmers we're always looking for the best, perfect timing. Rain is important, but the volume, the frequency is also important. But this year has been very good. I suspect we'll probably get rains right up to November in the south, maybe creep a bit in December. And when you go around the countryside, which I do very often, you realize there's a lot of ongoing production. Prices coming down a bit for some key staple commodities. So it's a good year. The challenge, we're in a situation where the weather keeps vacillating. So we don't know what this year is good, tomorrow is bad, but we pray that next year we'll have a normal rainfall pattern because we need the rain, whatever it is.
Thank you, KK. Now, let me come to you, Julian. There are certain brands that you experience every day, directly or indirectly. For example, when I drink coffee in the morning, I think Fidelity because through the YEF, you funded young entrepreneurs producing coffee. And so now I drink only made in Ghana coffee. And even though the color is not your brand colors, it still brings your brand into my memory and into my imagination. And you are doing so much in the space. I remember last year I was with your team in Sunyang to train the poultry value chain, people in the poultry value chain on all sorts of things. You signed a deal with Eco Business Fund worth $15 million to fund agribusiness. How is it going so far? Banking, supporting agric, supporting the youth?
No, thanks. I think it's going quite well. I think the first thing with banks financing agric and starting the process is a realization of what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And I think in the past, maybe banks have sometimes tried to build an internal capacity to understand the full remit of financing agric and even monitoring. And over time, I think the model is changing where we're looking at more technical support on the likes of GIRSAL and looking at how you even structure facilities not in a normal way. The challenges still remain. And I think what people fail to understand is that finance or access to finance for growing a strong agricultural sector is only one of the inputs required for success. Money is just one part of it. The technical assistance, the research requirements, things like guarantees to de-risk, the infrastructure to support, there's a whole plethora of things that comes in. And I think where we're sitting now is how do we, from where we sit with the likes of support from DBG, etc., start being on the around the table with regards to how do we impact the things, not just de-risk, but actually make agriculture a commercially viable proposition for banks to now start diverting their lending and risk assets into. And I think that's kind of a crossroads we're at the moment. There seems to be all the right sounds and all the right commitments from policy, from different directions. So it's about us keeping the momentum going and really starting to see some success stories.
Yeah, and you've mentioned something which I've heard from other people, that in the space, finance is not the biggest problem. Infrastructure, knowledge base, business models, understanding the markets, that's really the thing, exactly. Not just finance.
Not just the finance.
And I like the fact that Fidelity has put together a very good agribusiness team. I've been to various fora where people allude to the fact that your team, sometimes they come for loans and they leave with knowledge and how to structure their businesses, and sometimes you realize you don't even need it. So we need more people to be doing this. That's great. Mr. Duka, let me come to you now. I heard the president speak at the agribusiness finance event recently at Kempinski, and he was surprised that only about 4% of lending goes into agribusiness. When he said that, for me, if I could shout and tell him, but Mr. President, you solved the problem already with DBG, I could. So DBG's in the space. You are backing all these institutions to transform the space. How has the journey been for you so far?
No, I mean, the number one is remarkably well informed, and it's something that we're set up to help resolve that problem. So we've been in operation for a little less than 2 years, and during that period up till now, we've lent nearly 1 billion cedis out to the various sectors, mainly agriculture, of course, through our PFIs and banks such as Fidelity. But I think that the key issue here, and I think you addressed it very well, and I like what Julian said, it's a complex problem. And there's not one messiah. But the fact that we're beginning to talk and have these discussions is so important, because all these issues can only be resolved by people collaborating. And some of the examples that Julian mentioned, and you talk about other areas like poultry. Poultry is not just an agricultural problem, as people may think. It's also a trade problem. Right? And so we need to force collaboration. And once you force collaboration, you begin to then see that people begin to find solutions because they bring their different perspectives rather than single perspective or the silo approach that, to be fair, I think we've had in the past.
Yeah. So we are collaborating and building together to shape agric and also drive development. So if you check the DBG website, you would see together. You see words like we grow. So that is the spirit that is driving the change that you are pushing in the industry, growing together with different industry players.
100%. Everything we do is built on partnerships.
Now, let me come to you, KK. How are we doing in the agric space so far? This morning, I went to the Observatory of Economic Complexity website to look at imports, exports into Ghana. We're importing about $20 billion worth of things into the country. We're exporting about 12 billion. So if you look at it, there is a deficit. We need to grow more, export more. And then I realized that if you look at agric and agribusiness related imports, we've crossed $5 billion annually. Generally, how is the agribusiness space? Are we doing well?
Well, you call it a mixed result. I mean, some areas we're doing well, some areas nothing much has changed. So it depends on which value chains and which activities you're talking about. But, I mean, Julian says something which is critical. We're seeing a lot of interest in agribusiness by actors in other sectors. Because what I've always said is, if you look at what happened to us during COVID globally, the only sector that remained positive was agriculture. Okay, that was the first one. Two, I think it's very important for me to raise this point. I don't like talking about agricultural in isolation, because it's about agricultural value chains. And sometimes I think we tend to decouple agriculture, and I've made this point, and I think at that meeting, I made a point that from where I sit, in my view, lending to the sector is more than 3%. I mean, why do I say that? Depending on the nature of the structure, sometimes you finance, whether it's a processor or you finance an exporter, that money trickles down to those who are doing the production. So indirectly, you're financing them. Okay. So I would say overall, the industry is growing, but there are a lot of issues that we need to address. And I've always said, and maybe I'll re-echo it in a different way from Julian, that finance is just an icing on the cake. If the icing is sweet and the cake is not sweet, you bite into icing and you spit it out. And I think that when I'm happy that there are a lot of new emerging people coming up in agribusiness. In fact, from where I said, most of the projects we are financing are people who have nothing to do with agriculture at all. They are seeing opportunities, they don't want to invest in. But the problem is sometimes the coordination of policy, regulation. You talk about export imports. There are trade-related issues. As a country, we should export more. And as a country, we should reduce imports. Of course, you can't reduce imports totally. I mean, if you feel like eating apple, we can't grow apple here economically. We can grow it to be almost a specific piece of apple, so we can't do that. But what we need to do is that those value chains where we stand a competitive chance of producing here, we do import substitution. But then in partnership with Dbg, and we're getting Fidelity online, we're talking to Fidelity on a few deals, we are taking the rice value chain in a very serious context. And the idea is that over the next few years, about this year, we're hoping to do about 3 or 4 large projects, And the idea is to target those value chains where competitively we can produce them here. Yeah. What it does, it reduces the amount of imports we're bringing in. And then also, concurrently, we also target some export commodities. So for example, at GIRSAL, we are working on a chili project where we're doing trials now. The idea is that here was an industry that was very strong, give us millions of dollars. Farmers were benefiting because it was grown by smallholder farmers all over the country. We were banned, it went off the market. We're bringing it back to ensure that we're in compliance with the EU regulation. Now, that means that we're also boosting up exports. So I am very positive that in a few years to come, we will see the reverse, where we're reducing the amount of imports for certain particular value chains or commodities, and we're increasing the amount of exports. I mean, for example, we go to the rubber sector, for example. We've got one large one. As I speak to you now, there are now 3 indigenous Ghanaian-owned rubber processing plants in the country. So a lot of things happening, but like I said, it's mixed. And it will take time for all to congeal. But to make it faster, we need to look at issues of policy, regulation, because all these things impact on the sector. And then what they do is that they minimize the risk for the banks, the finance houses to want to invest.
So we are doing well in some spaces. We are failing, for the want of a better word, let me just use fail. We are failing in other spaces.
Well, a lot depends on the dynamics of it, whether the kind of value chain it is and what the global market says and where the dynamics of it. I mean, I can give you an example. So if you take something like rubber, for example, you had the Southeast Asians leading on it, okay? Liberia was a major player. After the war, they shut that they never came on the market. So even though the prices keep vacillating, what's happening now is that you're getting land becoming an issue in Southeast Asia. So it's now competing between rubber and oil palm. So Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, in fact, Cote d'Ivoire now is the 3rd largest rubber producer in the world. Ghana, we're also coming up. Okay. Now, it offers a huge opportunity for us because where rubber grows, cocoa grows, cashew grows more in the arid areas. But so there's a lot of land we have here which to do. So the world market offers opportunity for us to respond. That's why, for example, by the end of this year, we'll have 1 original factory foreign owned, but you have 3 indigenous Ghanaian companies in business and even thinking of expanding the production. Same with cashew, all right? We'll see some growth in the cashew. You've got to go to cashew exports. You've seen a tremendous growth because of the world market dynamics and so forth, because of land, competition of land in Asia and so forth. So it depends on each value chain. And it's for us to be strategic, select those value chains. So that's why for that we selected rice. Can we grow rice competitively in Ghana? Yes, we can. But how do we grow it? Do we go about the old-fashioned way of smallholder, no. Why don't we look at the whole plantations, integrated systems? And that's what we are trying to do with DBG, and hopefully we get Fidelity on board. And we can then, so we're rolling out one hopefully by the end of the year, and hope to roll out more next year. So that's the whole strategy.
And talking about Fidelity, like I said earlier, your team has been doing a lot across the country. What are the opportunities that you've seen in the agribusiness space so far, and what has been your focus as a bank in supporting the space?
I think the opportunities are all over the place. I think there's a plethora of offerings, people who are looking at the non-traditional, and I think some of the non-traditional comes with its own challenges because of growing methods and the structure and having the expertise to grow it. And then we're looking at our normal traditional. I mean, Kiki mentioned about rice, we've spoken about maize, sorghum, the normal standard ones, which we believe we can have some real impact on. When we talk, we don't normally like to speak a lot around cocoa for some reason, because that's a very different conversation. It's almost like we separate cocoa from, because of the whole financing structure and the complexities around it, etc. So normally put aside. But it's important if we're going to expand the base that we do look at some of these non-traditional. The main opportunities I think we're seeing at the moment is the fact that we're starting to see more viable transactions, especially where you get a GIRSAL on board. What DBG does is it gives a more flexible type of financing, which makes the structure of the debt easier to repay. Because if you look at traditional opportunity cost from a bank taking deposits short term and trying to lend to a long-term project. Some long-term, if you look at tree crops, it's very long-term.
Yeah.
How many banks have the patience, the bandwidth, the monitoring infrastructure to watch it to the end of fruition where you start seeing the gains and returns? And so where you have things like the DBG, what DBG does is not just the access to the finance, but it's actually flexible capital, which means that you can structure something for, from startup to wherever it is. But the startup also comes with its own risks. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're seeing, and normally I think we spoke about infrastructure. One thing I feel very passionate about is about policy and direction, and also really about focused value chains. So we have lots of different opportunities, but I think as a country, we really need to start having focused conversations, because the maximum impact will happen over time. But in the short term, we need to create a model that works. And so if we say rice, let's take the whole value chain. I think you can refer to, let's take the whole value chain of rice. And it's not just about financing a rice producer. It's all the way to the end, to the final consumer, and also for export opportunities. We take maize. Maize does varying things. We have maize that there's even the opportunity to create maize as an investment product, right? So there's that one angle where people can store and trade it. You've got maize that will go to manufacturing. You've got maize that will go into final consumption, etc.
Banku and Kinki.
Banku and Kinki. Then you've got maize potentially for export. Because from the banking point of view, apart from the impact conversation, if we get the agri-financing right, facing all the way potentially to export, then access to foreign exchange, which is the lifeblood of an import-driven economy, then becomes a lot easier. And so that's why it's important that banks also play in the space, because we are facing the demand for foreign exchange, people who are importing all the other demand goods that we have, but yet we have a very sparse access to foreign exchange, and yet we have agriculture, etc., that can support. I think the other opportunities is where we've seen the likes of when we have conversations with GIRSAL. I think the technical expertise, you spoke about people structuring. A lot of it is because they've had conversations with the likes of experts in GIRSAL. And when we partner with Eco Business Finance, they come with technical assistance. They come with experts who have a proven track record in other parts of the world in doing some of the specific crops. And so it makes the learning curve a lot less steeper for banks, because it's easier to turn an agronomist into a banker than it is to turn a banker into an agronomist. And therefore, because we don't want that long journey, the partnership and collaboration conversation has become a lot more important. And I think that's where the key opportunities are for us at the moment.
Great. You mentioned startups earlier, and I know the work you've done with the YEF. Now, I am just 35 years old. And if you look at our demographics, I'm older than 71% of Ghanaians. So it means that as we attempt to grow the space, we need to bring the youth along. You have worked with the youth a lot. What are the challenges that they bring to you that they seek solutions to? And how have you solved these problems with them using your innovative solutions?
I think The main challenge normally is the ability to scale up an original idea. And whether they are thinking of scaling up or they're already looking at the end game, which is the ability to have access to money to do certain things. So I think that's one of the challenges, is bringing them on site to say, look, you have to create a business and a model from the beginning that you can scale up. Otherwise, you might have 2 or 3 cycles and then you're gone. The other challenge is business acumen and understanding of the financial part. So you can have a passion for agriculture, but if you don't either create internal capacity, either in other people or within yourself, to understand the business element of running a successful agricultural business, then you will also fail. So the conversation is very difficult with someone who's interested in farming when you start talking about cash flow, you start talking about the investment cycle, you start talking about default, you start talking about insurance. It's all almost like language that they don't want to hear. They just want to plant. They've got, sometimes they've even got agreed off-takers, but they don't even have conversations about the quality, because they think because they have an off-taker, he'll take everything you give them. But they don't understand that there's a quality expectation especially for manufacturing, which is very different to local consumption and also very difficult to export.
Yeah.
So the 4 challenges we see in agriculture is very similar to what we see in SMEs and also even our corporate businesses. Apart from access to finance, which is one, but we've all said is icing on the cake. The next one is capacity, business acumen, etc. The next one is the regulatory environment. Navigating the regulatory environment. We talk about certification for exports. We have this global gap certification, etc. People don't understand that you need to go through that process to be able to even export your goods and make it acceptable to the mainstream externally. And then the other one is access to markets. So you have a product. Who's going to buy it? Are you focusing on manufacturing value addition? Even if it's consumption, you need a distribution channel. And if it's exports, do you know what those people are doing? So those are some of the key challenges we're seeing, and how we're supporting is with the likes of, if you speak about conversations we have with GIRSAL, even with Dbg, we've had some conversations around the technical assistance where there's been some capacity building internally for ourselves. But I think we're going to up it a notch with regards to the actual development of business acumen for young entrepreneurs that want to go into farming, who want to go into agriculture, and actually do it not just for the sake of something to do away from not having employment, but actually as a viable commercial venture that will lead to economic development.
This is Dbg Connect. My name is Kojo Agotobuating. We are talking about agribusiness financing, the opportunities, the challenges, and the solutions. My guests are the CEO for Dbg, Mr. K. Duka, the CEO for Fidelity Bank, Mr. Julian Opuni, and the CEO for GIRSAL, Mr. Kwesi Korboe. We've so far spoken about what the various institutions are doing, some of the challenges in the space, some of the opportunities, the trends. I want to come back to you, KK, before I go to Mr. Duka. Julian has spoken about working with the youth and some of the challenges in the space. For the want of a better expression, I want to describe that as the software bit of the challenge. Let's come to the hardware. You mentioned earlier that if you go to East Asia, for example, their rubber production may not necessarily grow as fast as it has to because of land issues. And down here in West Africa, Cote d'Ivoire is growing, 3rd largest rubber producer. They're also the world's biggest producer of cocoa. I think when it comes to cashew, they're the biggest as well. And they're producing as much cashew as we produce cocoa. So they are growing. Now, I've spoken to a lot of people who want to venture into agribusiness. Like Julian mentioned, there are people who are not agronomists, horticulturists, or they've not studied anything agric, but they are just pure businessmen who have looked at the numbers, the opportunities, and want to enter the space, and they say land is a big issue, a hardware problem. How do we circumvent this, and what are the opportunities, if any, for people to acquire land to do large scale, like the rice you mentioned, large scale rice?
Yeah, and that's where this argument of issue of policy comes in. I mean, there are 3 people in the space. You've got the agribusinesses or potential agribusinesses. You've got the financial institutions, and you've got the public sector. The challenge is that all the 3 should be talking. Now, there are 2 ways you approach it. you either have land banks. But even land banks, I tend to have a bit of difficulty because the issue is what decision drives me as an agribusiness person. Maybe land, that particular kind of soil may not be my number one priority. Okay. But then why can't we have a system in place to ensure that those who are desirous of land can get it? Look, travel around this country and you see empty land. I'm involved in a few land acquisitions by a few businesses. You go there and suddenly you see owners popping up. Okay. Countries like Kenya, fortunately for them, because the colonial masters like the climate and decided to invest in agriculture, they cadastraled and got all the land sorted out. So in Kenya, most of the large farms in Naivasha are lands that are leased, properly done, and you can monetize it as collateral to the banks easily. I mean, it happens all the time in Kenya. So I would expect that maybe food agriculture, and I've always told them that agriculture is a cross-sector activity. Lands, roads, communications, even health, all come into play. Focus on those soft side. So if it's rice we want to do, we've preferred this to the ministry. So what we expect the ministry is, okay, look, you guys want to do rice. What can I do to help those who want to finance with rice in terms of land? Can we liaise with the Lands Commission? That's how it's supposed to work. Because if not, then that's where the difficulty comes in. The same person who complained that I went to Fidelity and Fidelity, because they wanted collateral. But tell me, if you have an oil palm plantation and you went to Fidelity for funding to set up a mill, I think they'd rather take it than take your house somewhere because people may not buy, but this will give you instant revenue because it's matured.
Yeah.
And we've got to be innovative. So the problem I see is, and I keep on talking about it, the ad nauseum that sometimes is quite suffocating, is that unless we get our policy environment right, what's happening in the country is that people are doing all these things irrespective of what the policy issues are. And that for me gives you the hope that even in the face of this policy inconsistency and lack of collaboration, people are getting things done right. Can you imagine if these policy issues were coordinated properly? Can you imagine the effect of it? Yeah. It takes away risk, makes things easier. So if we've learned, I would say we should lead on that. For example, if we agree that the land rice enclave, like what Meda is doing, then let's agree that let's keep other places as a rice enclave. Anybody who go to the rice sector, we would facilitate for you to get land there. They want to invest, do their own land development and so forth, but they will have access to land that can be probably prioritized in the Registered Lands Commission. And that's the kind of conversation we should have. Because if not, the foundation, the systems will not help. And we've done a lot of smallholder farming all over the years. You look at, and let me come at rice, you look at we've put in a lot of, if you total the amount of money government has borrowed over the years from various parties to support the rice, and you total up, you look at how much import keeps on growing up. Because our rice consumption is growing up because our children, you eat all rice because you are my nephew, so you do rice. But the question you ask is that it means that we need to change our model. Now, between ourselves and DBG, we are working with one bank to finance a client who was due 5 square miles of rice in a farm plains. But he had to negotiate, navigate, and try and get all this land together. Why can't it be easy for him to go to Lands Commission through MOFA to get his land acquired for him because he's making investments? These are the challenges we're talking about here.
So for example, things like the Ghana Land Information Bank should be resourced to be able to capture enough data on lands.
Well, you see, I make a decision on where I want to go to.
Yeah.
Okay. I've always said from a farming perspective, for pure production, you can always address deficiencies in soils.
Yeah.
Unless you cannot grow certain things because of the climate. All right. Whether it's acidic, you can always address. But maybe someone want to go there because there's infrastructure. Because infrastructure is critical. There's no point growing, you can't move your commodities out of the place. Yeah. Road network, mobile connectivity. These are very, very critical things. So if we agree, and most private say, look, we're all going to have water regime for rice, it means it should tell public sector, look, that place is a good area for rice because one, it's close to the urban areas, the land's available, there's water, we're spilling water, there's water available. Let's harness it. What can we do to address it? And that's the conversation that we should be having. But we're not having that.
Yeah.
And then those of us in finance are blamed. sometimes for not lending to the sector. And that's where the problem is.
Yeah, because the foundations of the sector are not strong enough. So we need to build a foundation so that you can take us along.
No, we need to look at the sector from a cross-sectoral point of view. Let's not narrow it to that. Let me give another example.
That's why I'm saying the foundation. Because on the land, for example, the MIDA project, the Economic Enclaves project, MIDA has lands. Ministry of Energy has connected electricity to the space.
Excellent.
Ministry of Road has constructed an 18-kilometer road. Ministry of Trade has, through some of their agencies, are facilitating processing. Ministry of Food and Agric is leading on the technical side. GIRSAL, I know, has also brought a lot of farmers to the space to want to do pepper. So this forms the foundation upon which any other thing could be built.
Everybody's playing a role. And so there's a coordinated and consistent way of putting it together. And that is what is missing, But so I should say, are you equal to people in agribusiness? Because in the face of all these difficulties, they are so thriving. And that for me is a most strong signal you can send out that Ghanaians are entrepreneurial. They are willing to do everything possible. And that for me speaks volume of us. And I tell you that if we're able to address some of these obstacles, our culture should move in leaps and bounds.
Great.